He was just bones and blood when she found him, barely breathing, barely a man. And she was a widow, with nothing left but 2 hungry mouths and a worn-out prayer. When she dragged that dying cowboy into her home, she thought she was saving him. But what she didn't know was that he carried a secret that would burn down everything she thought she knew and build something stronger in its place. The day the cowboy came into Clara Jacobs's life, he wasn't riding much of anything. The horse carried him, sure, but not with pride. It moved slow, head low, sides foamed with sweat, as if the beast itself was exhausted by the burden it carried. The man slumped forward in the saddle, a shadow of flesh and blood. From a distance he looked like a scarecrow collapsing under its own weight. Clara spotted him just after sunrise while hanging laundry. The breeze was gentle, promising a hot day. Her boys, Levi and Sam, were still asleep inside. She paused, a clothespin between her teeth, and squinted. A rider? No, something was wrong. He was drifting. By the time the horse reached her gate, Clara was already in the field, boots kicking up dust. The horse stopped without a command, as if it knew it had found a kind soul. The man barely looked up. His hat hung low. One arm was limp, the other clutched his ribs. Blood had dried along his side, crusted black like burned molasses. His lips were cracked. His breath came in shallow puffs. Clara felt her stomach twist, not with fear, with hesitation. She didn't have the strength for strangers, didn't have the food, didn't have the peace. But he was dying. She ran her hand along the horse's trembling neck, then looked up at the man. "You hear me?" A grunt. That was enough. She called for Levi, her 10-year-old, already sturdy for his age. Together, they pulled the man from the saddle. His body sagged like it had forgotten how to stand. Clara gritted her teeth, hooked an arm under his shoulder, and with Levi's help, dragged him toward the barn. Not the house, not yet. She couldn't let him that close until she knew more. They laid him on a pile of old straw. Clara looked him over. Blood crusted his side. A bruise swelled on his temple. His ribs poked through a torn shirt. His boots were worn to the sole. A revolver sat in his holster. An old Colt, oiled and cared for, despite the man's condition. "Sam!" she yelled. "Bring water and that clean cloth!" Her younger boy came running, sleepy-eyed and barefoot, carrying a chipped basin. She soaked the cloth and pressed it to the cowboy's lips. He flinched, then groaned. His eyes cracked open for a heartbeat, pale gray, clouded with pain. "You're safe now," she whispered. But Clara wasn't so sure. She spent the day tending to him. He didn't speak again. She cleaned his wounds, stitched where she had to, and bandaged his ribs with old flour sack linen. He had 2 bullet grazes, both angry red and leaking infection. By nightfall, he was still breathing. She sat just inside the barn door, staring at him, wondering if he might rise up and kill her after all. The boys slept in the house. Clara stayed awake, her rifle across her lap, her eyes locked on the shadows. It wasn't the first time she'd sat guard over a man she didn't trust, but it might have been the first time she felt this curious. Morning came slow. The cowboy stirred. Clara knelt beside him, felt his forehead. Warm, but not burning. Then he spoke, so softly she barely caught it. "Water." She held a cup to his lips. He drank, cautious, like a man unsure if the kindness would vanish. "You got a name?" she asked. Silence. She narrowed her eyes. "Look, I dragged you off a dying horse, cleaned your blood, and gave you my last bit of turpentine. The least you can do is give me a name." His lips twitched, a smile or a grimace. "Emmett," he whispered. "Emmett what?" He didn't answer. "Well, Emmett," she sighed, "I'm Clara Jacobs. Widow, mother, dirt farmer, and you're bleeding in my barn. His head lolled to the side. Didn't mean to bring trouble. She frowned. You didn't bring it yet, but I reckon it's following close behind. By the end of the week, Emmett was stronger. He sat up on his own. He fed himself from the bowl of beans Clara brought each night. Her boys had taken to him. Sam, the little one, would sit in the straw and chatter for hours. Levi, the older one, was more cautious. He watched, he judged, he kept his distance. Clara just kept working, rising before dawn, tending chickens, chopping wood, sweating under the weight of survival. But every few hours she'd find herself checking the barn, just to see if he was still breathing, or if he was gone. One morning she noticed something strange. Emmett was out of the barn. He stood by the fence, shirtless, ribs still wrapped, a hammer in his hand, fixing a broken rail. He worked slow, deliberate. "You're supposed to be resting," she called out. He didn't turn. "Reckon you've done enough for me." "I didn't save you to be polite." "No," he said, turning with a small smile. "But it's the only way I know to say thank you." She stared for a moment, then turned back to her laundry. But that night she left a plate of cornbread in the barn without a word. By the 10th day, Emmett was mending the chicken coop, sharpening Levi's hatchet, even fixing the leaky pump. Still, Clara didn't ask questions, and Emmett didn't offer answers. Until a night when the stars burned too bright to ignore. "Where were you headed?" she asked. Emmett looked at the dark horizon, then back at her. Not sure anymore. She didn't press. Something in his voice said he wasn't running from somewhere. He was running from himself. For all his healing wounds, Emmett Cole was still a mystery. A man whose silence stretched wider than the prairie sky. Sam, the younger boy, followed him around like a pup. "Were you in a duel? You ever shoot an outlaw?" Emmett would just smile with his eyes, an expression that carried more ache than laughter. Levi, the older one, kept his distance. "Don't know what he wants," he told his mother. "Neither do I," Clara admitted, "but he hasn't done us harm." Levi kicked a rock. "Not yet." And that was the tension that hung in the air. Out here, silence wasn't always peaceful. Sometimes it was loaded. Clara had known quiet men before. Her late husband, Nathan, had been one. But Emmett's quiet was different. It wasn't absence, it was restraint. A man choosing every word with care. One evening she brought Stu to the barn. He was sharpening a pocket knife. "You ever going to tell me what happened?" she asked. He didn't look up. "What makes you think something happened?" She smirked. "Men don't show up with bullet holes unless they've got a story." He let out a slow, quiet breath. "I was trying to make something right." The words sat heavy in the barn air. Clara didn't push. That night, Emmett lay awake, staring at the rafters. He remembered his brother's voice, laughing. He remembered the night it all ended. Torchlight on the hills, the sound of gunfire, the cold click of betrayal. And he remembered the map. Tucked in his satchel was a folded piece of paper. It wasn't just ink and guesswork, it was proof. Proof the land grab that killed his brother wasn't legal. But that truth was dangerous. And Clara's kindness had just pulled her into the storm. The next morning, she found a note by the sink. "I'll leave tomorrow. You've done enough. Don't let my ghosts haunt this place." He was leaving. She wasn't sure if she felt relief or disappointment. That evening she found him polishing his saddle. "Got plans?" "Figure I've overstayed." She sat beside him. "My husband used to say, 'The land don't forget kindness.'" Emmett looked at her then, his eyes tired from carrying something too long. What happened to him? "Collapsed bridge. He was trying to get a bonus so we could fix the roof." Emmett looked away. "I'm sorry." She nodded. You didn't ask to be saved, Emmett, but maybe we needed someone to save. That made him smile. Not much, but enough. But morning came with more than clouds. A rider appeared, a stranger, dust on his coat, a rifle on his back, and eyes that searched the yard like a man hunting something buried. He didn't knock, just called out, "Ma'am?" Clara stepped onto the porch, her hand near her shotgun. You looking for someone? The man smiled, a smile that didn't touch his eyes. Just passing through, heard a story, said a wounded rider came through here a week back. Don't know anything about that. He tipped his hat. Sure you don't. Then he turned and trotted off. But he hadn't looked at her when he spoke. He'd looked past her, toward the barn. That night the silence wasn't peaceful. It was pregnant with consequence. When she came out to the barn, he was already packed. I've brought trouble, he said. She nodded. Looks like it. He pulled a worn envelope from his satchel. What's that? Truth, he said, and maybe a little justice. He offered it to her, but she shook her head. Don't give me that. You keep it. Why? Because the world doesn't need another widow. He looked down, the weight of her words settling in. Then, for the first time, he spoke without hesitation. I'll stay, if you'll let me. And Clara, tired of ghosts and empty chairs, nodded. Maybe a stranger's silence wasn't an absence. Maybe it was a promise. The riders came when the sky was a flat sheet of pewter. 3 of them dressed in black dusters, faces like stone. They reined in near the fence and just stared. Clara walked right to the gate. Can I help you? The tall one leaned on his saddle horn. We're looking for a man, wounded, on a bay mare. Sounds like half the cowboys in Texas. A younger man with a crooked smile leaned forward. Lady, we ain't here for games. He's dangerous, and if you're hiding him, that makes you dangerous too. Clara's jaw tightened. I don't take kindly to threats on my land. If you're hunting a man, you'll have a warrant. The third man chuckled. Don't need paper out here, ma'am. That's when Levi stepped onto the porch, clutching a wooden toy. The tall rider's eyes flicked to the boy. He smiled, the kind a snake might wear before it strikes. Clara moved between them without thinking. You best ride on. There's no man here for you. A long silence. Then the tall one tipped his hat. Just keep your eyes open. If you see a man named Emmett Cole, let him know justice is looking for him. He turned his horse. They trotted away slow, like they wanted her to know they weren't in a hurry, like they'd be back. That night, Emmett sat in the barn, head in his hands. They found me. Clara knelt beside him. Who are they? Their names don't matter. What matters is what they're after. He took a ragged breath. My brother owned land west of the Pecos. Then a company came, backed by crooked sheriffs and false deeds, said the land was theirs. My brother wouldn't sell. Clara's breath caught. They torched the house, Emmett continued. Left a paper deed on the ashes, but he'd hidden the real one. A map, a letter, proof it was all stolen. And you found it, he nodded. After I buried him, I tried to take it to the judge, but they were already watching. Shot me twice before I could get out of the county. I ran with that map in my coat. He looked at her. I didn't ask for you to save me, but I'm grateful you did. She stared at the barn floor. They'll be back. I know. You should go. I won't. 2 days passed. They prepared. Emmett reinforced the barn door. Clara dug out her late husband's Winchester and cleaned it. At night, they kept watch. One evening, Clara brought him coffee. You ever think about leaving this place? He asked. No. This land's all I've got. My boys need roots. Ghosts don't follow you if you stay still. He looked at her then, like he really saw her. The way she carried everything alone. The way her hands trembled only when no one was watching. "You're braver than most men I've known," he said. She smiled. "I don't have the luxury of being scared." Then the fire came. It started at the edge of the field. Dry brush and kerosene, a match thrown by unseen hands. By the time Clara saw the smoke, it was crawling toward the house like a living thing. "Levi, Sam, get to the creek!" she yelled. Emmett grabbed water barrels, beating at the flames. Clara followed, throwing wet sacks. But it wasn't just a fire. It was a message. A shot rang out, hitting the dirt inches from Emmett's boots. They dropped low. 2 riders on the ridge, rifles raised, shadows against the firelight. "We just want the papers, Cole," one of them yelled. "Give it up, and we'll leave." Emmett stood slowly, hands raised. "You'll have to come take it." The second rider laughed. Another shot echoed. This time it ripped through Emmett's arm. He dropped behind the wagon, breath ragged. Clara ran to him, rifle in hand. "We're outgunned." "No," he growled, clutching his wound. "They're outmatched." He tossed her the map. "If I don't make it, you take this. You show the judge. You bury them with the truth." She stared at it, trembling. "You'll make it." And with that, she rose from behind the wagon and fired 2 shots. One hit a saddlebag. The other hit the younger rider in the leg. He fell, screaming. The tall one turned and fled into the night. The fire hissed in retreat, and Emmett collapsed. The dawn that followed the fire was slow to rise. Smoke still hung like ghosts in the trees. The ground was blackened, scarred. Clara stood barefoot in her field, dress torn, hair wild, staring at what was left. Behind her, Emmett stumbled out of the barn, his shoulder wrapped in blood-soaked linen. "I've been running a long time," he said. She turned to face him. "You're not running anymore." He nodded once. He looked down at his battered hat. A cowboy's hat holds everything he's seen, everything he's lost. Clara knew it wasn't just a hat. It was a burden. "They buried the wounded rider from the ridge by the creek," Clara insisted. "He was someone's son," she said. Emmett didn't argue. Back at the house, he finally opened the satchel. Inside was the folded map, a yellowed deed. A photo of 2 boys on horseback, one unmistakably Emmett. And a letter. Clara read it aloud. "If you're reading this, Emmett, it means I'm gone. But this fight ain't about me anymore. It's about every family they'll steal from next. Take this to someone who still remembers right from wrong. Tell them it wasn't just about land. It was about honor." Her voice broke. "You're not running from a crime," she said. "You're running from injustice." He nodded. "They framed me, said I forged the deed. The sheriff in Stoneville made the records disappear. Now they're hunting the only proof that exists." Clara looked at the map, at the deed, then back at him. "Well," she said, "let's finish the job." The decision didn't come easy, but the fire hadn't just scorched the earth. It had burned away her fear. She'd looked into the eyes of men who came to kill, and she hadn't flinched. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was fighting. They packed the wagon, a few tools, food, a worn Bible, Emmett's satchel, and Clara's rifle. As they were about to leave, Sam pointed to the tall birch out back. "I don't want to leave Mama's tree." Clara knelt beside him. "I don't either. But if we don't go now, someone else will plant a grave beneath it." Emmett climbed into the seat beside her, his arm still limp, but his grip on the reins was steady. "You ever driven into a fire before?" he asked. Clara cracked a faint smile. "Once, the day I gave birth to Levi during a dust storm. I was alone. Didn't have time to be scared." Emmett just nodded, and they rode east. The journey to Austin was slow. They stayed off the main trails, moving by moonlight. At night, around a small fire, Emmett pulled a harmonica from his coat and played softly, a whisper of sound beneath the stars. Levi lay still, staring into the flames. "I think you used to be a good man," he said quietly. Emmett looked at him. "I'm trying to be one again." On the fourth day, they reached the city. A mess of wagons, smoke, and red brick. Emmett's posture changed, shoulders stiff. "There are men here who think I'm already buried," he said. "When they see me walk through those doors, they'll know the truth didn't die easy." Clara touched his arm. "Then we don't walk in quiet." Inside the courthouse, the air was hot and still. "We'd like to see Judge Hannity," Clara said. The clerk raised a brow. "You got business?" Clara placed the deed and the letter gently on the counter. The man's brow furrowed. Emmett leaned forward. "Tell him Emmett Cole came back." The sun bore down on Austin like a vengeful god. The courthouse stood like a red brick promise in the center of town. On its steps, Emmett Cole stood with the weight of a county on his shoulders. Clara was beside him, her hands firm on her son's shoulders. They were here to finish it. The clerk, after seeing the name Cole and the seal on the documents, had gone pale. "Judge Hannity will see you," he'd stammered. The judge was a man carved from law and long winters. "You're Emmett Cole?" he asked. "Yes, sir." Emmett placed the deed, the map, and the letter on the desk. The judge read, then read again. The room was quiet, only the tick of a wall clock counting the seconds of a decade-long lie. "Well," Judge Hannity said at last, "I'd always heard rumors, but this is proof." "They killed his brother," Clara said softly. "Took the land, burned the house, and tried to kill him too." The judge nodded slowly. "The sheriff in Stoneville, he was dirty for years. Died last fall. The man who replaced him isn't much better." "I've still got the bullet," Emmett said, tapping his shoulder. "If you need more proof." The judge's eyes held a flicker of old fire. "I'll draft an injunction. Send men to reclaim the property. Your name will be cleared. And the men who chased you, they'll face the court if they're lucky." The news traveled fast. Warrants were signed. Emmett's name was posted on the courthouse board, not under wanted, but under restored. The land was his. The law was behind him. But justice didn't taste sweet. The grave was still full. He stood outside the courthouse that evening, staring at the orange sky. Clara joined him. "Did you get what you came for?" Emmett nodded. "More than I deserved." "You deserved peace." He turned to her. "You gave me that. That night, they camped by a creek under the cottonwoods." "Where will you go now?" she asked. He thought for a long moment. "Back. To your land?" He nodded. "It wasn't just mine. It was my brother's. It's what he died for. I won't let the story end in court papers." Clara stared into the fire. "You'll need help." He smiled gently. "I was hoping you'd say that." Spring came early that year. Wildflowers bloomed in the cracks left by the fire. And on a patch of cleared land west of the Pecos, a house rose again. Board by board, Clara held the nails. Emmett swung the hammer. The boys herded goats and named every chicken. There was laughter, and there was silence. The kind of silence that comes when peace has finally taken root. One Sunday, a rider arrived from Austin. A letter from Judge Hannity. Emmett read it slow. When he was done, he handed it to Clara. "The men who pursued you have been found guilty. The courts have recognized your claim. Your brother's name is now honored. The deed to the land is yours, legally and eternally." The truth won. Clara folded it and pressed it to her chest. Emmett didn't say much, but she saw the tear he wiped away with the back of his hand. One evening, Levi asked, "Mr. Cole, what do you do now that the bad men are gone?" Emmett sat on the porch rail. "I plant things," he said. "Like crops." "No," Emmett smiled. "Like roots." Months later, Emmett knelt in the field beside a young oak he'd planted. Clara joined him, wiping her hands on her apron. "Clara," he said softly, "you gave me more than shelter. You gave me back my name." She smiled, eyes misting. "You gave my boys back their future." He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a ring, simple and worn. "I'm no preacher," he said, "but I'd like to make something honest out of what we've built." Clara stared at him, then nodded. The wind carried her whisper like a prayer across the valley. "Yes." She thought she was saving a stranger, but in truth, he was saving them all. Because sometimes the most broken men carry the strongest hearts. And sometimes a dying cowboy doesn't come to end his story, but to start someone else's.